Pleasant good day once again to all my YouTube fans across the world. It's my pleasure once again to stand before you to bring another YouTube presentation. So I, Imo Rameses Bakari, your psychologist and life coach. It is my desire to inspire you to rise higher. It is my desire to inspire you to do better. It is my desire to partner with you in 2026 and beyond to ensure that your life becomes something brighter, better, and more prosperous. And this will be done through coaching, through teaching, motivational speaking, feature addresses, conducting of our SCA, CSEC, CAPE classes, university courses, through counseling and coaching, through the purchase of books that we produce. My book Conversation costing 100 TT, 45 EC, or 15 United States dollars, or through community empowerment. And we are committed to work with you, as I said, in 2026 and beyond to ensure that your dreams could materialize. So the motivational word for today is that once you are given a chance, go with it, create chances if you don't have a chance, but keep in the game, because once you keep in the game, you definitely have a chance. Once you quit, there is no chances available. So keep in the game, keep on moving on, and keep on striving for that better life that you truly desire. So the topic today, South Africa, shame on you. Now, South Africa, as we know, is a very known country across the world, particularly coming from the point of view of the apartheid experience, particularly looking at the fact that we had many view it as an arranged transition into African rule. Many people rate Nelson Mandela highly, and then there are others who are arguing that he was part of a planned arrangement, even from his days in prison. So that is for another debate or continuing debate. But the point I wanna get at is that the native inhabitants in the majority numbers, the Africans of South Africa, due to the apartheid system, they were disadvantaged in every possible way imaginable. So they were separate schooling, they were separate medical care, they had to have passes to venture into certain other communities. The most menial jobs were afforded to them, and fundamentally, they live in the most impoverished conditions. And the ancestors of the Dutch and the British who came centuries ago and who have been able to establish themselves to a point that they command the commanding heights of the economy, they commanded political power all along, and although within the last recent dispensation of the South African elections, you could say they are back in power, but if you look at it in that way, you will also be missing the point that they have always maintained economic control. So the plight of the conditions of the majority natives have not significantly improved, barring some who have been members of the government through their Black Empowerment Program and people associated with them. But the fundamental conditions in terms of poor infrastructure, whether it's lights, water, medical care, and employment opportunities, have remained scarce, comparatively speaking, for the African community versus other communities. What has contributed to that? Is it the presence of fellow Africans from Ghana, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, etc.? This is the argument being advanced through a lot of vociferous protest action, spearheaded by fellow Africans. And I'm saying, that's a trap that they always set for us to buy into, because once they can maintain that disunity and that hate and that fight against each other, it makes it easier for them to exert control over the resources that they have become comfortable with, Because as we all know, people migrate to different parts, in different countries, all seeking a better living. And I am saying there is always a proper way to do it. And even though there may be any problem, let us say in terms of illegal entry, any civilized society must find a humane way in how to treat with it. But to blame the economic plight as solely being responsible on the backs of those people, I think it is a very, very unfair premise on which to promote that kind of action. Because actually some of them are people who have created businesses and certainly will have created employment for people of South Africa. So, it is very shameful, as a liberated African to watch that situation unfolding. And it is very painful, that, the unity of Africa that we all desire, since situations like these suggest that, it is really a long, long road towards such a realization. And when we look back at history, all those who have stood for, creating that kind of enlightenment and that kind of liberation, they have been treated in the most, brutal terms by those colonial forces. Whether we think of Patrice Lumumba, whether we think of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, all of these persons, whether we think of Thomas Sankara, they were all taken out, forcibly because of the fact that they were promoting unity, they were promoting African empowerment, and it's the same kind of, hate and scorn that is being poured upon the leaders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, because they are promoting African liberation, and the resources of Africa must be used for the benefit of people of Africa. But as we all know, the Berlin Conference of 1884, where you had European powers meeting for over 3 months and prescribing and deciding over a land that they do not belong to, how the land will be divided up, right? And the fight for Africa is so brutal due to the fact that if they cannot access the resources from Africa, their style of life would not be possible. And hence the reason that they would not give up, justly or unjustly in that fight. Of course, it is totally unjust because they don't belong to the land, and foreign powers should not have the authority to decide on the fortunes of a land that they do not belong to. But then we have the very sad situation of many of the local leaders, colluding with these outside forces against the very welfare of the people, making the situation even more extreme. We have had, a former president of South Africa who was in the apartheid struggle as a leading figure, who was accused of corruption, spent time in jail, was released, etc. When you look at all of those occurrences, it is very unfortunate in that having been given the spoils of power, that was the best time, to make the change that they have been talking all their lives. So if you didn't have the power, now you've got the power and you didn't do it, well then what's the argument now? And then we have, as I said before, many of the native Africans, scapegoated their fellow Africans as the cause of the economic plight in their country. I'm saying there's a civilized way to deal with any problem. If they're illegal immigrants, it doesn't mean that, you have to debase them or dehumanize them. I've seen videos where, fellow Africans were being deprived of health care. Health care should be a universal right that is extended to fellow human beings wherever they may be. Countries will have the respective laws and policies, etc., but human dignity must not suffer the expense of that. But then again, many people have been totally caught up in the fight for material, gain at the expense of being human. And if we are human, and particularly being fellow Africans, we need to bring that concept of togetherness back. The South Africans need to draw into their own concept of Ubuntu. I am you and you are part of me. We are all part of what the ancient Egyptians call the collective consciousness, which is the same concept of Ubuntu. And if we can see it in that way, civilized and humane ways will always be found, rather than attacking, maiming, killing, and blaming people who look like yourself, rather than trying to find a civilized solution And the leaders of the present regime certainly must take some blame in allowing this situation to spiral out of control. So let us show the world that we are true believers in Ubuntu. Let us show the world that we truly believe in the collective consciousness. Let us show the world that our communal system of living that has solved many problems in the past, let us bring back those kind of teachings to the forefront, and let us move forward in a way where the unity of Africa can become a reality. But when we see these kinds of incidents, it puts a long pause whether that reality will in fact become a dream. But all freedom-loving people, all fighters for emancipation, all fighters for African liberation, all fighters for humanity, not to be subjected to the brutality of what Africans have to go through. In South Africa, in North America, in the Caribbean, whichever part of the world, let us put our collective voices together and let us stand up for what is wrong and promote what is right. We must not stop because, as I said, life is a blessing, and that blessing must manifest on a daily basis in how we treat our fellow men. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing your comments in the comment section. And of course, stay tuned as I continue to produce videos for your reflection and education. So just give us a call at 1-868-778-5141, 1-868-779-2544, or email us at leadershipwithadifference@gmail.com, where you can avail yourself of any of the courses we offer and any of the services that we bring to you. So thank you for listening, and stay tuned for another powerful presentation next week, please God. Bye.